Okay, let's get started. So my name is Upmanu Lall, and I'm at Arizona State University, and I would like to extend a hearty welcome to all of you for Rethinking Water West. It's great to have all of you here. We hope you'll have a great day and will grace us with your wisdom as we go through. The event is sponsored by Science Water from New York, Veolia, Stantec, the Canada-Arizona Business Council, and Westwater. So I wanted to acknowledge all of these people for their contributions at the outset. And we begin traditionally at ASU with a land acknowledgement. So I've been in Arizona for about a year, and I have appreciated this land and the beautiful people here. So I hope you will too, and you'll come back beyond this event to see what we have. So to get things going, I would like to introduce Professor Peter Schlosser. He's the Vice Provost at Arizona State University and the Director of the Global Futures Lab and the Global Futures College. Peter was a colleague of mine at Columbia, and he led the way here and in founding the Global Futures Lab. And since he is in Europe at the moment, he's joining us through Zoom. So please give Peter a welcome. And Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Manu. Good morning, everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to Rethinking Water West, a convening of leaders and problem solvers committed to rethinking how we manage, sustain, and secure our planet's most vital resource. I really would have liked to be with you, but funny enough, I'm in a place where I'm surrounded by a lot of frozen water, glaciers in the Swiss Alps. Sadly, they already shown the signs of deterioration based on the pressure that's put upon them by climate change. And that leads me to the overall framing here. We are living in an era of profound transformation. Democratic and environmental stressors are reshaping the future at an unprecedented pace, creating complex challenges that demand immediate action and long-term strategic thinking, along the lines of what this meeting is about. So rapid population growth, urbanization, shifting migration patterns, etc., are placing immense pressure on strained resources, including water. Water is, of course, a critical resource for all societies, whether rich or poor. Water does not distinguish there. Around the world, too much water and too little water coexist as a defining paradox of our time. Overall, we have placed increasing pressure on this resource by overexploiting it and polluting many water reservoirs. The resulting crises unfold locally and globally, driven by many factors, including climate change, population growth, and unsustainable water management. Just a few examples. Worldwide, 703 million people, about 1 in 11 persons, lack basic access to water. And 2.2 billion people, about 1/4 of the population of the planet, lack access to safe water. That, of course, leads to casualties. Each year, about 3.4 million people die due to waterborne diseases. A report recently published in the medical journal The Lancet concluded that poor water sanitation and a lack of safe drinking water take a greater human toll than war, terrorism, and weapons of mass destruction combined. How we address these crises on a local level will shape the future of humanity. The present problems are not merely a warning sign of environmental distress, but a strong reminder that access to water must be guaranteed for all people to thrive in the places they call home. To draw a little bit of attention to some of the hotspots, here in the Western United States, for example, prolonged drought, we are in essence in a mega drought since about a quarter of a century, and overuse of the Colorado River have led to historically low reservoir levels, threatening water supplies for millions. Lake Powell and Lake Mead, the largest surface reservoirs in the US, are approaching dead pool conditions. We are also seeing too much water alongside water scarcity, as would be expected during a state shift, during which extremes are a common feature. Last year in South Asia, devastating floods displaced entire communities, while at the same time in the Middle East and North Africa, extreme water scarcity jeopardized food production and economic stability. Meanwhile, groundwater depletion around the globe, including regions such as the American Midwest and parts of India, is accelerating, endangering agriculture and long-term water security. Around the world, pollution from diverse sources such as industry, agriculture, and inadequate infrastructure leave billions without access to clean drinking water, exacerbating health crises and deepening inequalities. So these examples, these challenges underscore the urgent need for bold, scalable solutions, prioritizing long-term resilience. Water is not just a precious resource, it is a fundamental human right and the source of life itself. Water sustains ecosystems, nourishes crops, drives our economies, and supports the well-being of communities around the world. From the vast oceans that cover our planet by about 70% of the surface area, to the drinking water we access daily, water is the foundation of all life on Earth. Whether in expanding megacities or rural villages, water security determines where and how societies can thrive. After all, we live on the water planet. It is, of course, unfortunate that most of the water is salty residing in the ocean, and we have to live with about 1 per mil or so of the total water that we have available for purposes of drinking and other uses on land. Every person in this room, whether you represent government, finance, academia, or industry, you are here because you understand this truth. Water is the foundation of everything. Today, we are not just discussing problems, we are here to help shape solutions. And that's a really important part of that meeting, to understand where the challenges are, but then to look ahead and see what knowledge do we already have and are not using, and what knowledge can we create to help us master these challenges and turn them into opportunities. So in the sessions ahead, we will explore how to scale and implement solutions that can inform a broader global response and define the future of water security for generations to come. A little bit about the Julian Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory. Within GFL, we are exploring how water remains a sustainable resource for generations to come, and it is at the core of our mission. As a prototype of the University for the Future of our Planet, GFL uses transdisciplinary collaboration, innovative technologies, and indigenous knowledge to address water challenges through a holistic approach. At the heart of these efforts within GFL is the Water Institute, an entity for discovery and knowledge translation into action. The Institute is purposefully designed to provide actionable pathways for addressing converging water crises locally, nationally, and globally, so on all scales. It helps guide critical decisions that shape policy, improve infrastructure, and drive scalable solutions for a water-secure future. But we cannot solve this crisis alone. Water security is a shared responsibility. It demands collaboration between governments and industry, between researchers and investors, between global leaders and local communities. That is why we are here today. Over the next several sessions, we will explore how to scale proven solutions, secure the resources for their implementation, and leverage public-private partnerships to create lasting change. We have an opportunity to rethink water, not just as a resource to be managed, but as a shared responsibility. No single person, community, or nation can tackle this crisis alone. Addressing these issues effectively requires collective action, international collaboration, and a commitment to innovative solutions to ensure secure water for future generations. Before closing, I just want to talk a little bit about Manu. who introduced himself already. But Manu and I met at Columbia University around 2000 and spent quite a bit of time thinking about programs around many issues our Earth is facing, of course, with focus on water. Manu is really one of the most expansive global thinkers when it comes to water, climate, extremes, risk, and many other things. He is the director of the Water Institute here at ASU, and he's also a Global Futures Professor in the School of Complex Adaptive Systems. He brings decades of expertise to this challenge, and he previously was for a long time the director of the Columbia Water Center. His work has been recognized by numerous awards, recognizing his contributions to hydrology, climate extremes, and sustainable water solutions. They include the Henry Darcy Medal from the European Geosciences Union and multiple honors from the American Society of Civil Engineers. So before turning back to Manu, I would just remind us that this is our moment to rethink water, not as a problem to manage, but as an opportunity to innovate, invest, and build a future where water security is a reality for all. And for that, we have to think big. So I hope this is what will happen today, thinking beyond present boundaries, thinking big to ensure that water will still be the valuable resource in the future that it is for us today. With that, I would like to thank you, and I look forward to the discussions ahead, and we'll turn back over to Manu.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Peter. That was an amazing way of presenting it. The only thing I wish you hadn't done was talk about me. So we want to get things going. And I think given Peter's introduction, I don't need to say a whole lot. I also, as part of the agenda that was mailed out to people, put in a little blurb about what we are trying to do. The main thing I want to say is that one of the things I absorbed as I tried to work on water issues of different kinds around the world was people argue that we have the technologies that we need. What we don't have is the ability to implement them successfully or the finances to implement them and so on. What I've learned in response to those things is that none of that is really true. Yesterday, I was talking to Bo Jones, who's the director of the Water Institute of the Gulf of America, back over there. And he said that he had an expression he used that somebody described, which was, we are trying to solve problems of yesterday for tomorrow, and that's our future. And I think that's what we probably have to do. It's not something we want to do. There's no choice but to solve problems of yesterday. What I think we should be thinking about, that Peter is talking about, is how do we address the problems of the future and actually design something. And doing something like this with this group, I think is going to be very interesting because we bring together, as Peter said, the finance. Rama is next, so I'm plugging that basically. The consulting industry, the technology industry, and the public sector. But our goal is not just the US, as Peter said. We are trying to have an impact on how things are done to address problems that go back to the time before Christ, right? We have always had droughts. We've always had a concern with safe drinking water. We have always had a concern with floods. Are we building a Noah's Ark? Perhaps. The real challenge that I think we have to do is that America became the country that set the standard for how water infrastructure was built in the 20th century, how the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act actually set the pace for what public aspirations should be. I think what we need to do is revisit that in Rethinking Water and define what our aspirations are for the 21st and 22nd century and how we are going to get there. It's not about solving problems of yesterday. So with that, let me invite Rama over. Rama is with JP Morgan. He works on finance, he works on infrastructure, he works on climate and sustainability. He leads all those efforts within JP Morgan. It's remarkable because this is the largest bank in the world, So he's essentially guiding sustainability efforts for companies, for the public sector, and others, along with his colleagues who are present today. So we thought that perhaps we start out with Rama to say a few words, and then we'll navigate immediately into a panel that discusses where the financing comes from and what the role of the private sector working with the public sector could be to guide a transformation into the future that I talked about. With that, I must say I'm amused that boxed water is better. I'm not sure it's better than what, but it's there. So Rama, please come and join us. Please welcome Rama.
Thank you, Manu. It was a generous introduction, really, but the only reason I'm probably qualified to be here is because I grew up in southern India and spent a lot of my summer months chasing water tankers because that was the only way we got water. I've spent, and again, look, this is what I'll do is spend like a few minutes thinking, expressing kind of a thesis I have about water, which is probably ill-formed, and I'll be curious to hear your reactions during the breaks. But suffice to say, there are three of us here from JP Morgan. The other two gentlemen here are far more knowledgeable than I am on water. But even the big, dumb bank like JP Morgan cares about it, right? So this is clearly something that 2-3 years back we didn't spend any time on water as a sector, but we are increasingly spending more and more time on. It does seem like we are at a very interesting point when it comes to water in terms of, again, we view the world in terms of capital formation and capital flows. That is the lens we bring to the table. And it does feel like it's a pivotal moment, and I'll at least express my views why I think so. If I and we have done a bunch of things recently. We have held, convenings like this in New York during the Climate Week last year. We have done, we have published papers. We recently hired Dr. Sarah Kapnick. Perhaps that name means something to some of you. She was the chief scientist at NOAA till recently. And the way things are going, I think we'll have the opportunity to hire more smart people. The water sector, from at least my seat, has felt sleepy and boring for the most part, right? If somebody had asked me 2-3 years back to think, to say something about water, I would have said I have nothing to say about it. It's not something we spend much time on. At least in the US context, a lot of the water infrastructure is owned by the public sector. What little capital formation happens in the private sector is, it was like in the tens of billions of dollars at most, right? It never rose to the level of interest for a JP Morgan. And the return profiles, as we saw it, were quite anemic. It didn't make sense for a JP Morgan to kind of, get behind it. And as Prad, who's here, he's an expert on the topic. He's explained to me all that made logical sense. I mean, the way kind of the U.S. economy had transformed over the last few decades. The supply and demand of water were kind of in an equilibrium. We weren't really manufacturing anything. A lot of stuff had been outsourced. Things were generally, population growth wasn't really that high. Things were generally kind of in an equilibrium, and hence there wasn't really anything interesting happening. Now it seems like a lot has changed. In the very near term, it's very clear to us. I spend a lot of my time with energy companies and with technology companies. That's where kind of I spend a lot of my time. Clearly, those sectors have transformed in the last 12 to 18 months. A big part of that is the energy transition that is happening at some pace. We can debate at what pace. And then the AI boom that is happening, that's happening definitely at a very fast pace. And those seem a given, right? Energy transition, again, my understanding of what a need for, renewable energy requires far less water. Oil and gas extraction actually requires a lot of water. And if we are going to change the balance, it looked like we are going to go more renewable till recently. Maybe we are pivoting, given kind of, the changes in policy and the changes in the posture of the current administration. So that clearly has an implication for what happens to water. We are clearly very focused on AI and making sure that we do kind of more data center build out in the US and kind of make sure we don't concede leadership on AI to other countries, especially China. Clearly, the whole the data center and the AI value chain is very, very exposed to water. I am spending a lot of time with the big technology companies, the hyperscalers, talking about, again, I would say 80% about energy and about 10-15% about water is kind of coming up increasingly as a topic. I think the statistic I recently saw was the hyperscalers' water extraction has grown about 50% in the last handful of years. Now, each of them has some target that they will replenish, et cetera, 100%, 200%. We'll see. They are more and more aware that water is an important kind of critical need for them. So given all that, it does feel like, and by the way, manufacturing into the US of all kinds of things. We are obviously now big on domestic manufacturing. We want to reshore a bunch of things. Clearly, that is going to be very important for the water ecosystem. So looking at all of that, it does seem like, again, back to my point, the thesis I have is water is going to become, get into the big leagues, and people should care about it a lot. We talk about it a lot within JP Morgan. That's kind of a near-term, almost certain scenario in my mind. But then something that Peter was saying kind of, triggered this thought. If you look a little longer term, imagine a world, again, if this AI thing takes off, robots are doing all our jobs, right? Agents are doing AI, agents are doing all our jobs. You're just sitting around, we go buy a second home, we go play a lot more golf, right? That's going to be kind of water intensive. And then you have things like the GLP-1 drugs, right? We're going to live longer. That's not great for water either. So it's just, looking ahead, it feels like, the stress on water is going to be immense. And again, another thing Peter said that kind of triggered the thought, this idea that, supply and demand of water, on a global scale may or may not be balanced, but increasingly, if you're going to deglobalize the global economy, it doesn't matter. It becomes kind of a more local issue. Can I balance supply and demand in every jurisdiction where we are going to essentially kind of do our own things and we are not going to kind of, trade freely as we used to? That's a conversation we are having a lot on the energy side, by the way. It seems like in water as well, we should start thinking about it. If we can't really freely move economic activity, if I can't build my data center in Brazil because of a variety of things, AI diffusion laws, et cetera, well, then what's the point that, it's not much use to us that, Brazil has a lot of hydropower or a lot of water. We can't use it. We can't build our data center there, right? So all of these implications seem to me, again, back to my point, that it seems like it's an interesting time on regard to water from a capital formation perspective. So we are here. I'm going to be here for most of the day. I love to talk to you. I've already had a couple conversations with people who have interesting ideas. We are committed to spend time in the sector. We want to, put capital to work. We think it's an exciting opportunity. So thank you, Manu, for having me and having the JP Morgan team here. And I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. Thank you.